Okay, we are back online. Thank you so much for staying up so late and being so patient until we solve the technical issues. So the presentation today is about making the content the first-class citizen in the enterprise application architecture. A very brief introduction about myself. I have over a decade of hands-on senior level background in the full life cycle of development. In my spare time, I have a proper family, and I'm quite proud of it. In the past decade, I've been focusing on really crafting enterprise applications, and I just had a discussion a bit earlier today. The code bases that already exist are what make the actual business work, and this is my specialty. So I mostly architect large-scale applications based on existing code bases. So show me legacy, and I will embrace it, and I will solve your issues. A few months ago, let's say, I started a PhD in systems engineering. I'm trying to combine systems engineering and artificial intelligence. So if you're curious about that, please come over and reach me a little bit later. I want to first explain you what the purpose of having content as a first-class citizen is. So a very long time ago, like 6 years ago, I was working for a company based in Amsterdam, and when I first went there, my mindset was functionality-first approach. It has to work, and then we'll make it like pretty or scalable. But the thing is, when I started to work with the marketing team, they actually explained me what the marketing funnel is, and they're like in an IT team. We'll just look at the most important 4 steps. There are a lot more, but this is a simplified version of it. So the first one is awareness. How do you grab interest to the product that you're selling or to your business? You do that by a lot of marketing campaigns. And then once the people have registered their interest and start visiting you, then the number of people is narrowing down. Later on, they make a conscious decision to use your product. Either it's a trial version or they pay for it. And then they take a decisive action and use your product on a day-to-day basis. Now, all of these things, we notice that the developers most of the time focus on the last part, on the action part. That's the functionality-first approach. But everything about the business revolves around the marketing strategy and around content. And in the marketing strategy, there's a lot of more content involved than what we normally see as developers. A very quick overview, what are we not addressing today? So once we have content, most of the people are just jumping to, okay, let's select the most perfect CMS solution, and that's it. We're not going to talk about how these things compare to each other. We're also not going to look into permissions in the CMS and everything. And you already had excellent advice from the previous speaker about content delivery networks, so we're not going to repeat that either. So what exactly are we going to talk about? Well, I want you to see first how complex is the content that we are managing, and then look at possible distribution methods, ones that me and my team are using for quite a while now with various customers. And then we'll draw some conclusions related to high availability and see how this solution that I'm suggesting is going to work in a highly available environment. So if we start with the complex content complexity, then there is I read a lot of books. I don't watch video tutorials. I'm an old-fashioned lady, a bit too old for my tastes. And this excellent book, Complete Web Monitoring, is trying to divide businesses into, they're talking about monitoring, but they're looking at the various business models. So the first one they find is collaboration. So for example, Wikipedia or Facebook, those are collaboration businesses, and the way content is organized is very different from transactional businesses. So if you have like an online shop or other things, that's a transactional example. Then there are media properties. Blogs have been widespread, but there are a lot of other examples, and the way content is organized in a media property business is different. Last but not least, software as a service is a distinct example because the content is fully controlled by the company who provides the software as a service endpoint. Whereas in the other ones, the customer might already have a level of control themselves. So it's a shift of control. So having these things in mind, just imagine that this is the Proquist bed. I tried to find the relevant image, but I'm not sure I found it. So instead of trying to fit everything in one model, having like selecting the perfect CMS to manage all the content and everything, the better idea would be to step outside of this model and try to do something different. The normal process of capturing content from various sources might as well start with pen and paper. There are some people who already do that in 2017. But then there are also the digital documents that are non-structured, and I'm looking at Excel documents, which are an entire category of applications just by themselves. And then we have structured data. Remember, people who capture content are not technical people, and they will use any method to get their job done. So in this approach, just looking at how content is grabbed, the first issue that comes to mind is how are we going to version all these things? But then there are a lot of other issues as well. Imagine we already have the content and we're in full control, which most of the time is not the case. We also need to expose it. This is just all the components that we have in our company. So we have like structured and non-structured information, right, to make it more simple. Then we have UI to manage it, even if the UI is called Excel or Word. And the technical team is already building APIs to expose some of the content to a public-facing user interface. Now, this comes with some issues. For example, in APIs, we might hit the scaling wall because the content underneath is so varied. But then even if we try to duplicate the structured information and do, I don't know, cluster, MariaDB cluster, or whatever solution we might want to choose, then it might not be consistent enough to be served by the API. So all of these challenges are things that we fight with on a daily basis. On top of it, the public-facing user interface that is used to expose the content has security concerns as well that we as a technical team, we need to take them into account. Now, what we've seen is quite a simple version of it because most of the time we have things that are under our control as a company and we have to work with third-party data. With the spree of software as a service endpoints, we grab content from there as well, and we need to control it. And then we have to put all sorts of user interfaces on top of it, transactional part if we're selling things, but then also media information or collaboration user interfaces. And most of the time, with the customers that I've been consulting with, the trick is people are just taking off-the-shelf solutions, software solutions, and are trying to play Lego and make them assemble in a meaningful way for the business. And that might work on the short term, but as we will see later, in the long term, they effectively lose control of this because these software solutions don't combine very well to each other. So the whole idea that I learned by working in a marketing team as a technical person is to think of the content first and then identify the proper solutions on a software side. We will not talk too much about this part, even if I really like it. This is an excellent book that has a lot of good advice. I recommend books all the time. So this one is in my top 3. The thing that the author tries to introduce is, we as software people are working around anticipating change and trying to prepare for the worst from the very beginning, but the correct position that we should have is to build our systems in such a way that we accommodate change. So embrace change and deliver it on a daily basis. You've already seen all the continuous delivery talks, so I will not bother you with them. So once again, the brief is do not anticipate and over-architect in the beginning, just accommodate change and look at the content because it will change dramatically once your business is growing. So let's see how can we tame this hydra with so many heads. So how do we distribute the content? Well, if we look at a typical shop page, it has a lot of places that we can look at. For example, we can have a product information, technical information, and we also have like media descriptions and everything, right? But then there's pricing and availability. And all of these things have to be rendered in the same place, but they are very different because the frequency of change of each is different. Once we properly describe a product, then the technical information will most likely not change unless we made a typo or something, right? We don't change the product description very often. Media information, on the other hand, maybe we want to add new pictures or videos or other things. So they do these things change, but rarely. Pricing, if you see all these ads that you have this price of a product and then it's discounted, you notice that the base price of a product doesn't change, but then there may be marketing campaigns that are applying discounts on top of it. So it is changing, but infrequently, and it depends on marketing strategies, so these things can be predicted. And then we have the availability information, which changes frequently. So we can, just by looking at the content, we can see that we can use a divide and conquer approach to tame it. And then there is the collaboration content. If the users are allowed to add content to our website, then I just took some page from Amazon. So these guys have question and answers, reviews, and customer content. And how do we know how often this change? Well, we don't. It's on a demand base. So if we have a promotion for this particular product and people are landing on it, or are just using it, or it's a launch of a new product, iPhone 8 or whatever, right? Then all of a sudden we have a lot of content for that page. But then 2 months later, it will not be as frequent. So just keep these things in mind. Don't think of the functionality, think of the content first. And now we get to the more technical aspects, which are more interesting. So the classical mistake is to have whatever content management system you have built in your company or taken off-the-shelf solution and use the same code base, like execution, to render an illustration interface, the CMS UI, and to have, let's say, modules that are handling the customer-facing part, but the same code base. And then we say, OK, we are reusing code from there and everything. This is the most classical mistake you can do. So what I'm suggesting instead is CMS solutions are perfect for one job and one job only. And that is to capture the content. Whatever is happening, just grab it and work with the content in an administration panel. Don't use it for the public-facing part. So whatever we render for the customers, we need to have like a much lighter code base that will supply that information. But then the question arises, how do we get the content that is tailored for the content management system in the customer-facing part? And this is the thing that we are going to try to solve at this very late hour of the day. This is another example. I worked for a similar company. So the business model goes like, in Romania, we have price.ro. It's the same concept. So this is shopping.com, and what they do is they sell products. They don't directly sell anything, they provide content. So the same product is coming from various vendors, and they get money from those vendors on clicks or something. And then the thing is that these vendors, in our case eBay and Walmart, we need to import that information and match it to the same product so that we can display various prices for that product. And this is by no means an easy task, because each of these vendors has a different data structure, and they provide maybe a file-based approach or an API or other things, but the data structure is different. So our goal as developers is not only to import the information that these guys are supplying, but also to do a mix and match. And it happens quite often that this cannot be done on an automated fashion every time. Maybe they just change the feed or the data structure from last week and everything. So the right thing to do is to offer a human person the possibility to resolve the data conflicts in the CMS. CMS is perfect for building modules that solve these kinds of problems. But then the question arises, now that we have all this content grouped and labeled and done correctly, how do we partition it? We looked previously at the time criterion. Maybe in your business you will have a different criterion, whichever applies to you. This is just the example, right? So if you have like content that updates rarely or frequently, then we package it differently. So the product information changes rarely, make it up as a package, and then do the availability or the pricing discounts in a separate package, and deliver content separately because it will be smaller. How do we, in fact, deliver it? Well, as developers, we tend to have already some sort of a DevOps process in place. And I'm not just saying it because we're on a DevOps stage, but because most companies are migrating to a DevOps approach. So why not use the same solutions that we use to deliver code and package it to do the same with content? Just treat content as code and say, okay, this is a new version of the content, just like we have a new version of the software, and install that one. So then the combination between our various data partitions and the code base itself constitutes the functionality that we are delivering all together. And the tools, maybe you've been to the previous presentations, how can you actually send the information in production? Jenkins is the subject of a presentation on this stage a few minutes ago, and there are other ones. So the tools, you already have them installed. You just need to tell them to do something a little bit different with content and not with code. So then, going back to our initial problem, if we will use this content management system to grab content, then how do we push these things? Well, we use those tools to make the packages with the content and push them as different items in production for the front-facing part. So then the customer-facing interface will be talking to a much smaller code base that is specifically designed for extensive reads and some writes, right? Whereas the CMS code base is heavily optimized for writes and for less reads or in a lower traffic environment. This solution is called a single silo architecture because we as a team coined this term as a silo. So I'm trying to explain to you a little bit what it means, and I can only do that in terms of showing you how to solve the high availability issue. This is a screenshot taken from a famous booking engine, booking.com. Have you ever used it to book a hotel or a holiday or something? So you might be familiar with the approach. They just list a lot of information, like you see price discounts and all sorts of things. But if you look a little bit closer, you will see here that we have a text saying if this hotel is in high demand and there are only 3 rooms left or something. But then the button says, see both available rooms. So how many rooms are there? 2, 3? It doesn't matter. Because based on your search, the hotel still has availability. And when you click the button, even if there is only one room left, you will buy it. And you will be successful as a customer. So then the content needs to be tailored on your experience as a customer. This is the lesson. And then how do we apply this, this lesson into our boxes and arrows diagram? Well, it's very simple. Content sources are multiple, but I tried to make like a classification. So the most important way you can divide them is it transactional information, like really critical information, or is it non-transactional, a product description, media, Q&A, whatever. Because then on the customer-facing part, where you have the content pieces, you can have this code discuss with the content that you pushed in the silo, but you can go to the transactional part. And the trick is, in the CAP theorem, you have consistency, availability, and partition tolerance. You can have different models for each of your content partitions. So the content partitions that contain information that is non-transactional, you can work on the high availability part and everything, and you can distribute it as you want. But then for the transactional part, try to minimize the communication. So if you just send like small JSONs with IDs, then it will be very tolerant because you will be able to make a lot more requests because the transactional data source is so much, contains only the information that is relevant. So then the code that is facing the customer can work with different consistency models. And we said we are going to introduce, to explain what the silo is. Well, the silo is nothing else but the entire functionality, end-to-end functionality delivered by one server, 2 servers. It doesn't matter how many you have. If you can deliver all the customer experience with a set of machines and pieces of software and content, that's what we call a silo. You might say, yeah, okay, why give it a name? Well, it's a very interesting thing that you can do, because if you give it a name, you are able to horizontally scale the entire architecture, not just parts of the code. So you don't focus on having a solution that is somewhere inside the code base, but you treat your application as an A/B testing platform. And then with silos, if you have more than one, then you can say, okay, this silo is the first variation, this other silo is the second variation. And if I want to, for example, test how often should I push content in one silo, in production, I will say, okay, production is silo 1, and then I want to push more often content and see how it performs. I will just make another silo that contains the entire end-to-end functionality and content, and use a different approach. Like, I don't know, replace partition content A, transition from Memcache to Redis. Okay, that's a variation. Or something more clever, if you want to be permanently online. I don't know if you remember, about a month or 2 ago, AWS had a big issue in the East data center. And a lot of businesses went down because of that. But with silos, what you can do, you can have your own private cloud, you can use DigitalOcean, I don't know, Rackspace, pick your poison, whatever works for you. But you can have a full backup in a different data center if you architect your application very simply by treating everything as interchangeable parts. And because it's the last talk of today, I kind of removed about 10 slides because I want you to be safe and sane. So I'd rather take some questions. Thank you so much. Yeah, as expected, everybody is very tired. And even in the previous session, there were very few questions. But don't be shy. Or if you're shy, you will find me later at the after party. And you can torture me with questions.
Awesome, then. I'm pretty sure that you're going to meet Georgiana at the after party.
Yeah.
Where we'll be a little bit more energized. So thank you all for attending this presentation and all the presentations from today. Thank you again to our sponsors that made all this possible, the ING Software Development Center. And don't forget, like in 15 minutes on the main stage, the winner of the contest will be announced. So everybody please go to the main stage and see you all at the party. Don't forget to bring your badges, as it's a requirement for you to enter. Have a great evening.